Hello, my name is iAntonio Patterson, host and producer of the English Coach podcast, where I attempt to add a splash of color and life to your learning experience by inviting you to live the language. The show is self-sponsored and independent and offers you immersion into the language in a fun and interesting way. Today, I'm happy to present to you episode 71, the first in season 6 and the second in this cross-promotional initiative that I started a few weeks ago. It's a video podcast, so if you are listening to this episode in your podcast player and you're interested in seeing the participants of the show today, seeing a little bit of my studio and also that of my guest, do feel free to head on over to www.englishcoachpodcast.com and look for the show notes page for episode 71. You can also look in the little description box in your podcast player, and you should see a direct link that will take you directly to what I like to call the show notes exclusive. Now, you can see the video. It is there posted on the podcast page in full length if you so desire. That's the only place it's posted right now. So if you're interested, feel free to head on over. Now, why does this episode exist? Today we'll be talking about the notion of language learning as a dynamic system. And that involves looking at a wide range of various aspects that do impact the learning experience. We look at methodology, we look at tradition, we look at proven approaches that have been shown to help over the past years. Me personally, I've been working as a trainer for 15 years to adults who want to learn English as a second language. So, I for one do know what works and what doesn't. We also look at the more fun aspects that help to enrich the learning experience. And, these things that you do outside of the classroom, such as art and other free time activities that serve to help to cause the learning experience or the learning itself not to feel so much like work. Another quite compelling topic of discussion on the show today is the notion of diversity and inclusion. Yes, I know everybody is talking about it these days, but not everybody is really doing something about it. Anyway, whatever the case is, we approach inclusion, whereas we look at accents and the influence it has on learners of English. I've definitely met some learners of English as a second language who put themselves under immense stress because they are convinced that the accent that you hear when they use English as a second language is not acceptable. And they, for whatever reason, want to sound like a French person speaking English or a Spanish person speaking English or a Canadian person speaking English, a British person or an American person. Now, around that topic of diversity and inclusion, and in this case, maybe self-imposed exclusion because of an accent, our job as trainers is to help learners of English to recognize that what they really should be focusing on is clarity and understandability, and not so much on, beating themselves over the head to sound a certain way. And we kind of go into that a little bit, and, it's a much larger topic, of course, but it wasn't exactly planned. But I am glad that this conversation emerged from our episode today. So you might find that particularly interesting. Now, as I always say on my podcast, this is not a lesson. It's a show. But if you are interested in signing up for lessons or signing up for learning groups, taking part in various learning activities or the like, feel free to head on over again to www.englishcoachpodcast.com and you can register your interest for any course you find over there. All you have to do is look under the training tab and you will see all the courses on offer. On the website, there is also a contact form. All right, so that was it for the introduction of episode 71 today. I really hope you like it. And without further ado, on with the show. So, Leontes, finally, you are here. I'm so happy to have you on the show today.
Thank you very much.
And
Thanks for having me.
yes, you are most welcome. I was very inspired by what I've seen you doing on YouTube.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, I'm very inspired by it. I mean, it's a little bit different from what I do. That's one of the first things I noticed. But yeah, actually, at first I saw you on Instagram,
Ah.
and I thought that was the full dimension of what you're doing. And then I happened upon YouTube, and I was thoroughly surprised. Yes. How long you been doing YouTube, if I may ask?
How long did we have the pandemic? 2 years or so. Not in the first. Well, I didn't do YouTube in the first year of the pandemic, but I did start recording some videos.
Mm-hmm.
But I posted them internally at my school, and then the year afterwards, I thought, well, we might need to prepare for another lockdown, and
Yeah.
as such, I thought, well, why would I put the videos on YouTube? And then I found out that it's not as easy as it seems.
Yeah, it takes a lot, no? Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just personality that you obviously have, but also some technical skills that you have managed to master, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yes.
I always had this video editing thing I liked, but
Mm-hmm.
it was a weird hobby when I was younger, and then now it's kind of turning into a bit more professional. I even
Yeah.
pay Adobe like a lot of money for their programs. That's how.
You use the
Yeah.
video programming software?
Yes, I'm one of those people who pays Adobe for Premiere Pro,
Okay.
Photoshop. But the thing is, I used it. We have student licenses, so I got a student license at some point as
Okay.
a teacher. So that
Mm-hmm.
was
Mm-hmm.
cheap. But
Mm-hmm.
then I got into the ecosystem, and everything is now in Premiere Pro, and I know how to use After Effects and everything. So I'm not going
Mm-hmm.
to change anymore. So just stuck. I'm stuck.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. And I mean, I'm not in the practice of giving so much promotion, but I use Photoshop, as a well, photographer. I use it, so I pay something like 11 or 12 euros a month. For my sound, however, I use Audacity,
Oh
and
yeah.
this is for the people who are interested out there in doing podcasts or videos for themselves. And for videos, I use Corel Video Studio, which I would definitely recommend for
Oh yeah.
anyone because it's like 60 euros and it's enough. I mean, I cannot pay Adobe for, I don't know, what is it? Their video cutting software
Yeah.
and their audio. That's just too much.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. I
unbelievable.
got the entire package, so I have everything, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, I kind of save up for it and then pay it once. That's how I do it.
Yeah.
I
Well,
used to use Magix Video Deluxe. Do you know that one? It's from Germany as
no,
well, a German company, Magix. That was quite
no,
good, actually.
no, no, no. It was. So are you saying it is no more?
Well, the thing is, at some point, you probably know this as a content creator yourself. Then you get this
Mm-hmm.
feeling that you want to do something, right? You
Mm-hmm.
want you want a word to appear in a particular way.
Yes.
And what I noticed with Magix is that it's very user friendly, but it's also limited because it's user friendly. Whereas
Ah.
in After Effects and Premiere Pro, you can literally change nearly everything you want, and that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
really make it user friendly. It's not you see what you get,
Mm-hmm.
but what you see is what you get. But it is, with some googling, YouTubing, you can get this message across that I envision when I see something.
Mm. What you see is what you get. It sounds interesting, but sometimes what you want to get is what you don't
Yeah,
yet
yeah,
see.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. That's true. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I don't want to knock Adobe because I have the greatest respect for them. It's just that, I mean, I just can't afford it.
yeah,
And I've,
yeah.
I've
I
learned
understand.
to say that. And I say that with all pride. I mean, if it works for you, it works for you. It's good. But I ain't paying them for no Audacity. What do you call it? Audio program
You
or
don't have to
video.
pay for Audacity.
No, Audacity is good. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
Audacity
perfect.
is excellent. Yeah,
But what I mean is the audio and it's podcasting, it's voice,
yeah,
right? I do like 4 tweaks. I have my standard little fixes and it's fine and it works
yeah.
perfectly, you know? All right. Well, we have digressed a little bit before we even started and there are listeners who are tuning in. Yes, my listeners and your listeners, I hope as well, who want to know why this episode exists. And I'm just going to run down quickly what we've prepared. I wanted to tie this interview into the idea of handmade training, which kind of is in connection with the other episode, the first in the cross promotional series, episode 68 that I did with George. Wanted to touch on that a little bit. I wanted to talk about your superpowers and your methodology and style. I also wanted to talk a little bit about what you mentioned to me recently about language learning as a dynamic system. I want to talk to you about your experience as a language trainer in the Netherlands, you say? Yes, the Netherlands, right? Not
Yeah,
Holland.
yeah, yeah.
The Netherlands. Okay, all right. I will say the Netherlands.
Oh well, there are some people who might claim things about it, but I don't really care actually.
Okay,
It's
yeah.
easier to say Holland.
Holland. All right. Well, yes, I want to hear about your experience there and, some of the lessons that you have learned, things that you want to share, and any message that you want to put out there. We're both doing this for our learners. I do it for present and past course participants. Maybe you do the same, and anyone else who's interested in the show. Right. So that was just a rundown of what we have planned for today. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, fantastic. All right, I'm going to go straight into it. As I said, the idea of handmade training. Um, the theme is, or let's say, the theme of the last podcast, episode 68, was handmade training enriching natural language. That is my goal for my learners. And I'm interested to know, what does that concept, that notion mean to you?
Well, if I understand it correctly, or if I have understood it correctly, I would say that natural language is, of course, the thing that we constantly aim towards as language teachers. When I was at university, I was very much interested in this idea of English as a lingua franca. I love the UK. I love their culture. I love everything that they do, except their weird food sometimes. But I love it a lot. And when I lived there, I enjoyed being there. I enjoyed being, you know, immersed in this British lifestyle and this British way of life. But um, I also know that English does not belong to the UK anymore, nor does it belong to any native speaker country, because um, in the end, learners who are learners in Germany or in Holland or the Netherlands or whatever you like, they are never going to speak to native speakers, or never, not as much as we kind of play or kind of do. So they're probably going to speak to people who don't speak German in your case or Dutch in my case. So they're going to
Mm-hmm.
speak English as a lingua franca, as a
Mm-hmm.
common language that they speak with other non-native speakers of Dutch or German. And I think the more natural language they use and they are exposed to in this lingua franca context, I think that um, you know that will be of their benefit. And it doesn't have to be British English standard or American English standard for the sake of being American or British. It can be any variety of English that fits their English as a lingua franca goal.
Yes, yes. And the natural language approaching that, if I understood you correctly, it is feeling comfortable with, let's say, the variety of clarity that you bring forward. Is that correct somehow?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Well, I definitely do agree with you on podcasts. We like to say, "Oh, I agree with you," and absolutely. But in this case, I definitely do. My goal is clarity, and if there is to be a standard, I like to speak of an international standard that I've spoken of since the first episode of my podcast, which was coincidentally a little before COVID. It was November 19th when I started, and I've been talking about an international standard ever since then. The idea as well, of course, nothing against the Brits. I really love the British accent, especially in film. I love it, and going to London and so on. There are many of them, but the idea that it doesn't really belong to the Brits or the Americans anymore, that is clear. And there are a lot of people talking about accents these days, and also about inclusiveness. And if you, the well, I'm in Europe. I've been in Europe for 20 years. You're in Holland, and you know that quite well. In Europe, we like to make standards for everyone else.
Yeah, yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah, that's what we do. And yeah, the idea of some people might want a British accent. Maybe they want to work in film or theater, or they want to do advertising or whatever. If they want it for themselves, then it's perfectly fine. But I agree with you in that I would also say, let's not close other accents out. Yes, other nationalities. Let's be
Yeah,
inclusive and focus on the clarity,
yeah,
understandability
I
of the
agree,
language.
definitely. I like writing,
Mm-hmm.
so I I understand that we need some sort of standard, and I know that picking the closest thing is perfectly fine. So let's take the British standard, who, of course, who they invented English, right? English comes from that country, so let's accept that.
Mm-hmm.
So let's apply British standard to our writing, or let's do American spelling once in a while. Fine, I don't
Mm-hmm.
mind. But as you mentioned, it makes no sense to expect our Dutch children, or I teach children. I used to teach children, of course,
Mm-hmm.
to expect them to speak perfect British English, and make fun of them for mispronouncing th sounds, and
Mm-hmm.
those things where they're
Yeah.
perfectly intelligible.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and as I said, in an English as a lingua franca or international English context, we don't need to use British English Standard. We can use whichever variety we think
Mm-hmm.
will be intelligible enough.
Yes. 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 Yeah, it's sad that we use language somehow to define status and, close people out or close people in or whatever. I mean, babies do that. I always talk about when a child learns the word mine or no, then they use it quite a lot. And we've been doing it ever since. Lawyers do it, politicians do it, and it's not something that's going to stop. But yeah, as trainers, as teachers, I think it's our job also to remind people that it's not always an expression of power or status that we use language for, but also to connect with people
Yeah.
and yeah, to make people feel included. All right. Well, natural language, that is what we were talking about. Thank you very much for that, Leontes. And the second question I have here, I've, spent a little time writing this, so please bear with me. And I'm just going to read it. It says here, the power to publish within the limits of your own personality, style, and methodology helps you to define a competitive advantage. How thankful are your students for that?
Um, it's different actually, because I think so. I've been doing exam training because we have our final exams here in Holland in
Mm-hmm.
these weeks, and I've been doing exam trainings in a live stream on YouTube for, I think I've done 3 of them now. And then after the exam, I take an hour to discuss the exam and look at caveats and pitfalls and weird things. And I get a lot of appreciation from people who listened to my tips and actually applied them and got a better grade because of that.
Mm-hmm.
But we also are a country, I don't know if you know the Dutch a bit, but we're also a country who don't really like people who boast. To
Mm-hmm.
some extent, we don't like that. Now, I'm not saying that I boast. I don't do that. At least not in my YouTube and content and materials. But um, I noticed that there is a bit of unease sometimes. So usually, if I were to make something that's very useful and then they use it, then they say, "Okay, this is nice, thank you." But as soon as I might brand it as my own, people
Mm-hmm.
might think, that's a bit weird. That's unusual or uncomfortable."
Yeah.
And so I do think that most students, kids don't care because they don't know any better. But especially older learners might not appreciate this competitive advantage that you might have,
Mm-hmm.
because, and I agree, of course, with this idea that education should be free and open for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And education is not a business, if you like, as selling something, especially not in my field of work where I work. I work at the University of Applied Sciences now, or at high schools where I used to work. There's no competition, so it's a bit difficult, honestly.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Well, what rang a bell when you started answering was the fact that you said you prepare people for exams, but I do not think that that does not give you room for your own personality, style, and methodology. It is just, when I say personality, style, and methodology, I don't mean just branding, Of course, this is encapsulated in the brand that is you, but you can look at it that way from a strictly business point of view, or you can just look at it on an interpersonal level, whereas somebody just likes you. They give you a chance. Yes, you, Leontes, not someone else, but you a chance to to explain things to them. They don't close you out, right? So, I mean, again, even in preparation for exams, I am sure that your way of explaining must have some competitive advantage, some advantage that differentiates you from someone else. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
I definitely, I think, but that also comes from my own vision on school and education. I
Mm-hmm.
have very high standards for my own students, and they all will agree that my standards are very high because I think you need to put the best of yourself forward. But
Mm-hmm.
I also definitely believe that school needs to be fun.
Mm-hmm.
So when I used to teach in high schools, I would always say, "So did you have fun today? Are you still having fun?" Um, and I think that's part of my methodology as well. It needs to be
Mm-hmm.
fun. You need to have fun. And sometimes you need to do things that are not fun. And then I call them challenges. Those things are
Yes.
challenging.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so I think the fact that I put fun and having a good time and being happy at the most important thing of my teaching, I think that might give my give me a bit of an advantage because I
Yes.
really try to understand when I have kids who are complaining about something or who are tired, for example, I try to understand why they're tired and why they're complaining and what makes them feel uneasy before I move on and start teaching.
Mm-hmm, 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 mm-hmm. Yes, well, I'm definitely sensing some style there. I'm definitely sensing a preferred approach that obviously works for you. I mean, of course, we can be modest in our way, but, I was just interested in knowing there are some people who like to work with me and they only want to work with me for whatever reason. And they have a bad time with other trainers. So, I just wanted to kind of offer you the stage to talk about what you think and what your students think are the wonderful things about your approach to training.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Now, there was a concept that sometimes you answer questions, you actually answered the question three already. So I'm just going to jump to the next one. And you mentioned a concept that you called language learning as a dynamic system. Would you like to tell us a little more about that? What do you mean?
So it comes from the idea of of life or things as a dynamic system and or a complex dynamic system, which is there is a difference between the two, but I'm not going to elaborate too much on that. But um, it kind of sees everything as a system, so it focuses a lot on the interconnectedness of all the parts in a system, and that makes a system work, right? So it's a concept from the psychology. It's well worked out by a professor at the University of Groningen in the town I live, and he came with this idea of seeing psychology and people as a dynamic system, which means that everything is interconnected and everything influences everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the essence of a dynamic system is change and variability. So the system is built on the idea of variability, meaning change. And that
Mm-hmm.
means that if you have several variables and each variable, which is a part that you can influence. When one of them changes, the system changes. And because one variable changes, the other variable will always also change. So, because all these variables are constantly changing, the system keeps changing. And sometimes the system changes a lot, or it changes a little, or it changes for the better, or it changes for the worse. But the system will automatically try to adapt to a certain, you know, a state, and that
Mm-hmm.
state might be a new state. And if you apply this to language learning, you see that language learning is a web of these interconnected variables, from input to exposure to language aptitude to even intelligence to some extent. And um, how you look at the world, how you listen to people, what you see in certain things, and everything is interconnected. And even if we look at skills, listening, speaking, writing, and reading, these are variables in that system as well. So if you look at language learning as a dynamic system, then you don't see it as a linear a process. All right. So you're never learning a language, because learning might imply that you're finished at some point. You're acquiring language. So it basically becomes language acquisition, because acquisition never stops. The system
Mm-hmm.
changes and it goes from one state to the other if you influence variables.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and instead of looking at language acquisition as a linear process, you might look at it as something with variability, where the more variability that applies in a particular um, that applies between measuring points, and that could be anything. That could be marks, that could be results on a reading test, results on a writing test. And the more these points change, the more the system is changing. So the more variability we have, that might be an indicator of acquisition and this change and this language progression, basically. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the concept of language learning as a complex or not complex dynamic system, where you see where it's not linear movement. Don't go from A to B in a linear way, but there's lots and lots and lots of variability between each point. And the more variability we have might indicate change and thus acquisition.
Mm-hmm. Understood, understood. I'm gonna tell you this, the same wisdom keeps coming back and again in different forms, which means that it's good wisdom. Yeah. And I'm gonna, from what you said, you spoke about the linear character that some people might tend to believe. That is good for measurability. Yes, moving from point A to point B, calculating return on investment, for example, seeing everything along a linear timeline. However, a complex system, which is a notion that I actually touched on a little bit while I was studying in the UK. I did this at master level leadership for sustainability, and we spoke about living systems, yes, interconnectedness, ripple effects, and use that model to understand ecosystems. A lot of these things come from ecosystems, living, growing systems. What would, however, make that probably difficult is how do you package that in such a way that let's say a potential client or a potential learner recognizes the value and can measure their progress within this systemic paradigm that you've just mentioned. How do you measure progress if it's not linear?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's also, one of the things that I've been discussing with a colleague over the past few weeks is how are we going to tell other teachers about this and make this practical so they can use it? Because teachers think in tests and teachers think in results and marks, and
Not
because we
all.
want to show progress, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We want to give two tests and say, well, I taught you in between, so now you're better at test number two. Where I would say, okay, you're not better at test number two. Why? What happened? What happened with your system in between? Is it changing actually? Maybe your
Mm-hmm.
system is changing and overcompensating something. But I
Mm-hmm.
understand that if you want to see progress,
Mm-hmm.
then there must be a way to measure it. So,
Yes.
what I used to say to my students is let's pick one particular thing. For example, let's take present continuous. Dutch children tend to overuse present continuous everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that they would use verb plus ing and with the auxiliary be. So I am living. And they would use am living, am doing everywhere. So I would
Yeah.
say, right, I'm going to explain to you now where you use present continuous. You write it down, and then you write something for me. And that's going to be our measure, our starting point. And then you're going to write lots and lots of different things, and I'm going to give you feedback, or you're going to use a computer program to give you feedback. And every time you're going to count the number of instances of that present continuous and check whether you've done it correctly. And it takes a lot of time because you need to put effort into your change, right? Because we're doing it with grammar, and grammar is not, of course, the way you should teach language in the first place. But okay, it's a good example to show how you can do this. So the student then needs to put effort into understanding and learning about present continuous. Where do we use it? When? Why don't I use present continuous here? What happens if I do this? What happens if I do that? Is this correct? Is that correct? And then you get this variability in lots of present continuous use to no present continuous use because they're overcompensating all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
hopefully at some point the system regarding present continuous use will, with the right amount of exposure, so we
Mm-hmm.
need to have exposure. We need to give them exposure. He or she needs to listen to Netflix or podcasts or your podcast and listen. Okay, is he using present continuous? Present continuous. Yeah, present. Right. And then hopefully the brain will automatically deduct and find out why present continuous is used. And then after some lots and lots of feedback rounds, hopefully present continuous will settle in and the system will adapt to a new state in which present continuous is now part of the person's language system. So yeah, it's very difficult to measure, but with a close eye and focus, I think you can get there. You can
Mm-hmm.
get there, and you can show progress
Mm-hmm.
because the
Mm-hmm.
progress is not in okay, I have 5 mistakes here and no mistakes here. The progress is in between. What have you done to improve? And maybe your test won't improve, but your language system will improve because you've spent so much time looking at this element that
Mm-hmm.
you will improve.
Yes, yes. That was kind of mean because measurability of let's say learning development initiatives, it's a problem, because they are the quantitative results, they can easily put on a spreadsheet, and then there are the qualitative results, which are sometimes much more important, and that doesn't allow itself to be measured so easily anywhere. But I was just interested to know how you did it, because I also have to persuade, as I call myself an independent podcast independent trainer, and sometimes I have to go out there and acquire clients. And there's some people who are more persuaded by the quantitative ways. They want to do lots of grammar, lots of check boxes. They want to be able to say, well, we've done 10 grammar concepts in I don't know, 3 months, and then they can check that off and feel good. And then there are others who want to be able to bargain at a flea market in English.
Yeah.
You know, um, and it's always a matter of sensing what they prefer and then trying to frame it in such a way that they themselves can also recognize progress, not only in the topics that you deliver but in their learning.
Yeah.
you know it's
Yeah.
it's a challenge. It's a challenge. But I mean, working for exams, you said you I have prepared let's say people for exams before, and they've had some success, but it's not something that I do so often. I haven't done it in years, to be honest. Um, what's that like? Does that make it easier? And I mean, I don't know, how easy is it for you to bring this kind of systemic thinking towards, let's say, preparing for an IELTS exam?
Well, so I'm doing our Dutch final English exam is a
Okay.
reading exam, 14 texts and 40 something questions.
Mm-hmm.
So they're good exams because the
Mm-hmm.
people make good exams, but the exams are exams. They're not material. And that's a very big difference. And that's something I definitely believe in. They're exams and they're very good at being exams, but they're poor materials. So what I did in my live stream was basically make an exam and tell them, right, these are the answers, or this is the answer to this question. You can find it here. Look at this word, that word. So it's really last minute work. What can you do tomorrow to pass your exam? That's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
But now this might sound a bit hypocritical if you're a listener and say, wait, you just said about dynamic systems and then you apply tricks and you jump through hoops just to pass an exam. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
because some people need that. Some people need that because they didn't have lots of language learning at their school. They only did the grammar rules.
Mm-hmm.
um, but it's a view, it's a vision of how do you learn a language, and you don't learn a language in a linear way. So in
Mm-hmm.
my vision, I wouldn't touch those final exams if I were to teach for 6 years at the same school and with the same kids. I wouldn't touch those final exams until the last few months. It's good to make one of them. It's good to know the tricks and the tips, and it's good to see how the exam really looks like.
Mm-hmm.
But the exam is an exam, and it's a measurement tool. It's not your materials.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't prepare them for the exams in over 6 years. I would give them lots of exposure, and a bit more difficult exposure and easier exposure, and have them produce something difficult, produce something easy. Give a scaffold, more scaffolding or less scaffolding. Um, and today I gave a lecture about flipping the classroom and blended learning. That's also
Mm-hmm.
something that I would apply in that class, because I set the boundaries basically of what I
Mm-hmm.
want them to do, and I let them roam around the area, not literally of course, but figuratively, roam the
Mm-hmm.
area looking for ways to develop their language. And I have this thing I do where students ask me a question and I gave an even vaguer answer. Well, it's a very vague answer where they might, I say, right, yeah, maybe, yeah, sure, why not? Because I
Mm-hmm.
want them to find out what their knowledge gap is and then fill that knowledge gap themselves. Because my answer is fine. My answer is I can give you the answer, but that's not learning. That's not your system adapting. That's simply me giving you the answer. You need to figure out what you don't know. And as soon as you figure that out, that might be you don't know how to write an essay, or you don't know how to use linking words in your text, or you don't know what the passive is. Then
Mm-hmm.
you need to do something to get there, get more exposure about the passive, see the number of mistakes you made. And then hopefully your system will change. And then the final few months, I will give you all the tips and tricks you need to do for the exam. Um, Even for Cambridge, I teach Cambridge exam training as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Mm-hmm.
same, but it's not the material. The material is the world. It's your natural language. It's the thing that's your material. The
Yeah.
exam is the exam. Make one or two to get the hang of it, fine.
Mm-hmm.
But that's
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
exam. That's not the material.
Understood. Understood. You know, Leontis, I have the greatest respect for what you do. I've told you before, and your approach, and I would never call you hypocritical, because I know that sometimes we have to just wear different hats and, dance a different dance depending
Yeah.
on who we're doing it for. And, that's fine. That's just life, But you have answered so many questions already. We're actually almost through with the questions, but, you know, um, there is one here, number 7, and I wrote it where I said, mm, now that we've touched on some of the things that are uniquely different about your approach, we definitely have. You went into the way you you conduct a class. Just a minute there, I got a feel of you kind of conducting the class, like it's done in the opera, the conductor. And I do that sometimes. You come into your flow and you just know what is right without really being able to explain why and you just do it. It's like your dance with the act of teaching or training. Now, the question really is, what is your goal? Yes, what is it that you want your students to achieve? Yes, the ultimate goal. Yes, also I know you want them to pass the exams, yeah, I know you want them to learn somehow, or achieve learning, not from you giving them the answer. But what is the ultimate goal you have for your people?
Um, well, I would say that they learn how to challenge themselves, but also, of course, I'm an English teacher for a reason, that they
Mm-hmm.
are able to do everything they want in English, or that they can use English in the way they need it. Um, and the problem is that we have, our English level is quite good, actually, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest. Dutch
That's
students,
not a problem.
well, no, that's not a problem, but it asks for a lot of differentiating. It asks that you always challenge them. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes students don't want to be challenged. They just want to, as you said, tick the box and go ahead. But to be a good user of a language, to be near native,
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the native speakerism idea. I think that's outdated all the way.
You
But
don't want to use it as a measure.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But at least to act as a native speaker, to be near native, you need
Yes.
to challenge yourself, and you need to be curious about the language, and you need to enable to be fluent, you need to get a lot of exposure. And
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
hope that after all my classes, students had fun and the
Mm-hmm.
students learned something. And to be honest, sometimes when I used to teach a secondary school, we didn't do English. We didn't do English. I'm kind of doing the in air quotation marks. We didn't do
Mm-hmm.
English. I didn't explain a grammar rule at all, but we talked about stuff. So
Ah.
sometimes students come in because they had, I don't know, a maths exam, very difficult,
Mm-hmm.
and they were stressed. And I had classes where I talked about that marks are not everything in life for an hour in Dutch, even though I
Mm-hmm.
believe you should do it in English, but fine, in Dutch, to reassure these kids, because don't put unnecessary pressure on yourself. And
Yeah.
sometimes we talked about the birds and the bees and the sky and everything in English, or I showed them a video about something in English, or I used to take a tweet and then film my class about a tweet and have a
Mm-hmm.
spontaneous discussion in English. So
Mm-hmm.
we didn't
Mm-hmm.
do English with, again, the air quotation marks,
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't explain grammar rules. I didn't give them
Mm-hmm.
a vocabulary list, but I
Mm-hmm.
did talk about stuff. I did show them new constructions. I did explain particular words. Someone wanted to say
Yes.
something in Dutch and in English, and I said, what's the word again? And I said, you go on your phone, find the word. Is it that the word? Is that the word? So we did
Yes.
English, but
Mm-hmm.
not in the way that they might think that we did English.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
think that's my goal, to have them learn English in a dynamic, literal dynamic way, fun
Mm-hmm.
way, and
Mm-hmm.
basically challenge themselves to be near native speakers in a way that suits them.
Yes. Understood. Well, that sounds like a good goal. I always say I want to get my learners to dance with the language, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
and yeah, to feel good with it, derive good feelings, and in classes sometimes I also try to create positive emotional associations, because
yeah,
then they'll never forget. It's said that you'll forget, for example, what someone says to you, what you see written somewhere, but you'll never forget how someone or something makes you feel.
yeah,
So I try to bring these associations to the language learning experience as well, with arts. I use photography, I use videography. Sometimes I write a little bit, and yeah, that's what I try to do as well.
yeah. I showed my students today, who are I'm a teacher trainer now as well, and they
Mm-hmm.
have to teach. And I was talking about flipping a classroom. I showed them a video in which I wore a wig, a blonde wig,
Mm-hmm.
while I was explaining something, and it was very funny. They had to laugh, and I said, "Well, you get what I mean, right? It has its effect." Yeah,
You wore a blonde wig.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I actually have one, and I should probably try that one day.
yeah, yeah.
I
It
should probably
helps. It
try that
helps.
and be very serious,
Yeah,
and just pretend that it's not there.
yeah,
Well, I mean, I wanted to ask you this, but I've been to the Netherlands or to Holland maybe 4 or 5 times, and there are two things that I learned in Holland, right? I learned, first of all, that not everybody smokes in Holland.
No.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I'm from Jamaica,
Oh yeah.
Yes, so I'm kind of familiar with that notion sometimes, or that prejudice. And I learned from a guy, he worked I think he worked for Nescafe or something. They made coffee pads. And this guy, I met him in a bar once. I think was it in Maastricht? I think it was, yes.
Okay, Maastricht.
Maastricht. Thank
Yeah.
you, sir. Thank you, sir. It wasn't Utrecht.
Yeah.
It was Maastricht.
Not
Thank
even
you.
Den Bosch
No. Oh, okay, please,
or
please, please.
Scheveningen.
I'm good with German, but not with Dutch. Yeah. Anyway, this guy was in the bar and he said to me that he doesn't worry about anything at work. The only thing he worries about is satisfying his customer. He says customer is king, and that's the only thing he worries about. Absolutely nothing else. And at the time, I thought this guy was just so cocky. How can he say that? He doesn't have to worry about his costs. He doesn't have to worry about his employees. He doesn't have to worry about anything, coming to work early. His only goal, his single goal is satisfying his customer, And I'm just wondering, I mean, of course, there are people who listen to your YouTube shows and they're not customers yet, right? But what is your approach to customer satisfaction? Yes, how do you navigate what good language learning to be as against, satisfying a paying customer? That's probably.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know whether I do know that everybody smokes. That's for sure because I don't. I don't know whether we have the tendency to please our customers. I know Dutch people are very good businessmen and
Mm-hmm.
women. Of course, I wanted to say
Yes.
business people.
Business people.
Dutch people are very good business people.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know whether the customer is always right. I don't believe so. I don't. I just bought a new car, and
Mm-hmm.
I had to negotiate a bit, but I didn't get everything I wanted. I think.
Yeah.
No, but I think if you look at the teaching space on YouTube in particular, I think you have to be honest at some point as well. You have a particular approach, and if you do the same thing again and again and again, so the same as other people, you're actually not doing anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, as an example, I found out that making grammar videos is actually a waste of time because there are so many grammar videos on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
So I cannot compete to someone who has 2 million subscribers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, However, I do know that there is not one teacher on YouTube who corrects other people's work online.
Mm-hmm.
So my approach is a bit modeling, right, for the writing parts of language learning. I can talk about how to write a review, I can explain everything, and I can model it a bit as well. So I model um, something because I know my own students, they like to have a teacher show them how to do something. So that would be, I think, my customer satisfaction approach, where I'm simply honest, right? You want to know how to use a particular grammatical tense. Okay, that's fine. There are videos about that. But you want to see how to write a good C2 proficiency essay, watch my video because I am going to show you how this person who has written quite a good essay can improve this essay to get even a better essay and a better result.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that would be my approach. I have one specific thing, and I think that might help you. And if you want this, then you can do that. But if you say, no, I just want to know the grammar rules or I just want to know the rules, fine. Here are other videos that explain, not by me, but by other
Mm-hmm.
people who can explain perfectly well how to write a C2 essay or how to write the perfect book review. Um, I'm just going to show you what you can do to improve your book review. Again, I'm focusing on the process and the change instead of the end result.
Fantastic.
I hope
You
that
know,
explains your question actually.
Yes, yes, and much more, because I've got the feeling that I was pushing you a little bit too much by asking you what differentiates you from everyone else, and I was trying to be a little bit gentle there, but you took up the challenge and you've just told the world what differentiates you from all other YouTubers out there. Yeah, you're offering more focus on the writing
Yeah,
and framing and modeling. Thank you very much for that, because
yeah,
you answered a question, you sensed it probably, but I didn't want to put you on the spot too much, but that's a very good distinction or differentiation, whatever you want to call it.
yeah,
Thank you for that. And I'm gonna be honest with you as well. I i do not do the YouTube thing. I mean, um all hats off to you. And I mean, I've used it, the YouTube approach, to teach myself many things, or to seek out knowledge of other things, informally, and it worked really well, mostly photography, podcasting, videography, and so on. And even some teaching methodology as well, some website stuff, lots of things I learned from YouTube. But I've decided not to do it, particularly for the reason that you mentioned. There are already so many. Yeah. But good for our listeners, good for my listeners, good for yours to know what it is that your niche is. Thank you
yeah.
very much again for mentioning that.
Anytime.
While we're there, this is usually at the end, but for anybody who's listening, please just tell me, what's the name of your channel?
Yeah, so it's Mr. Henriquez, which comes from the way students approach teachers here in Holland. They usually do last name. My name is last name is Henriquez. So my YouTube channel is also called Mr. Henriquez.
Fantastic. And your Instagram as well?
Yeah, yeah. But then with
Okay.
underscore N from English, because Mr. Henriquez sort of was already taken. So
Okay,
just,
okay.
yeah, practical thing.
Well, whatever the case, as a matter of course, I will always be doing, or let's say, I will be doing what do you call it, a show notes page chock full of links for anybody who is interested in finding out
Yeah.
where your videos are, where your channel is. Yes, they can always go to the show notes page. I will put a link there to your Instagram, to your YouTube channel. And are you also on LinkedIn by any chance?
Yes, but LinkedIn is just for for recruiters and showing my
Mm-hmm.
class, my old high school friends that I work
Mm-hmm.
at the University of Applied Sciences now, and then they show me that they're lawyers, and I think like, oh,
Oh,
okay, right,
oh man, it's a headhunter's playground, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah,
Yes. Yeah, it's fine. LinkedIn is fine, but I
yeah,
mean, what I get the feeling that every click there, every like, every comment is strategic.
yes, yeah,
Nobody is
definitely,
gonna like. What's funny about also English? I post stuff about English, right? But a lot of people, they say that they already are very good, or they master the language, so they will never touch anything that looks like help
yeah,
on LinkedIn. Yeah, that's what I find.
yeah,
And in the language schools, when you look at the some of the language schools and some of the apps and so on, they make posts, and it's really only their staff that interacts with it.
yeah, yeah.
It's just funny like that. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, um, Leontes, thank you for that. There is one last question I have, which is, it's a little bit down to earth, but it's touching on something that I find very interesting, not interesting, very important, and it has to do with handwritten notebooks and printed dictionaries. What are your thoughts on that?
When I was at university, I studied multilingualism. I had a course on multilingualism, and I had a professor, and she um, banned laptops from her classroom. And I was all angry and said, well, why? I mean, I always used to make notes on laptops without being distracted. Honestly, if the class was interesting, I would just type my notes, type the questions, and move on, and not be distracted by Facebook. And we didn't have Instagram on the computer back then. But
Mm-hmm.
and then she said, no, just try writing down. You have to write down. And then we negotiated a bit. Me being Dutch, negotiating, and we came to the conclusion that laptops were allowed in the lectures, but not in the seminars. So in the seminars, I had to write down stuff. And in the end, I didn't really care because I have lots of notebooks at home and I like writing down. And I know that there is some research claiming that writing by hand is a better way of learning than typing.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to write more as well, instead of type everything. Of course, digital writing also counts. So, but I think
Mm-hmm.
that's very useful. It's a very good way to learn something. Same goes for printed dictionaries. I think the effect of using a printed dictionary can be beneficial for a language learner. It's a skill
Mm-hmm.
that you need to have. It's just one of those basic skills like filling out your tax forms that you simply need to do once in a
Yes.
while. Um, but I do think that for something like a dictionary, using something online is just easier. Looking up
Mm-hmm.
synonyms on a website is just way easier than going through a thesaurus and then, finding the synonyms, etc., etc. Because in the end, it's the same idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have problems. The reason why I ask, I have problems. I have lots of course participants who just refuse to write anything down.
Yeah.
And, I tell them, listen, I also learned German as an adult. I started learning German at 28. And I still have some of the notebooks. Um, the act of writing, it's physical, you're writing, you're feeling the paper, you're feeling the pen, you're smelling the ink,
Yeah.
you're hearing the sound of, and all these senses are involved. And I think the more senses involved in learning a word, the better you will
Yeah.
remember it.
Yeah, I
That's
agree.
what I think. Yeah. And the idea of using a physical dictionary as well, it exposes you to the words.
Yeah.
Subconsciously, your brain is picking up on these things. Subconsciously.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my vocabulary in German is huge. And I mean, I can't write poetry yet in the language, but I do have a large vocabulary, and that allows me to understand. My receptive skills are very good. I can watch anything, understand anything. The most complicated dialogue I can get, even some dialects I can understand.
Nice.
So that was, yes. Did I
Yeah, and
interrupt you?
I wanted to add just a bit about so you say about the writing words. I do the same when I teach writing. I like teaching writing.
Mm-hmm.
Print out the outlines. So I print them out, I give them to the students, the planning stages, and I say, just write it down. Because as soon as they start writing sentences, I go like, no, you shouldn't write sentences, first words, ideas, mind map your things. And I think I found that that works better. I found
Mm-hmm.
that, a computer is very useful, but writing down your ideas by hand,
Mm-hmm.
that's way more effective. Then you have your ideas visual. You're not staring at a screen. You can use your screen to look up stuff, but then you write down again what you found. So you
Mm-hmm.
transfer the information through your motion into your
Yes.
brain. So, as you mentioned, I definitely agree that there's a very large benefit of writing stuff down. You know?
Mm-hmm. 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 I agree with also what you said about the planning. I also try to get my students to write a plan. You know what's difficult? When I say to them, this is another thing. I say, listen, scan this page and pick out the words you don't know.
Yeah.
And they start reading the page.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's the hardest thing to say, no, don't read, just scan it. Yeah. Or if I say, write down a plan with just I don't know, maybe bullet points of the ideas you want per paragraph, and they don't do it, they start writing immediately.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's so hard to
Yeah.
get, sometimes,
Yeah.
yeah,
And then I
yeah.
always say, so where's your outline? No, no, this is my outline. I say, no, that's not an outline. That's an essay. Okay, start over. Go back. Outline. Yeah, but I already have. Fine, then take stuff from your essay, put it in the outline.
Yes, yes. And I mean, that's also an art in itself, it's like doing well, let's say a degree or a thesis
Yeah,
and summarizing it, making it shorter is also an art in
yeah.
itself. So that's probably how do you negotiate though? I mean, as an English teacher, English as a second language, how do you ask them to write? Do they write first in Dutch?
No.
And do you try to prevent them from using a translator, for example?
I of course, I don't like translators. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Google Translate as a dictionary, fine. You know, if you need to
Mm-hmm.
know the word for blah, then you look up the word for blah. It's easy, fine, it's not a problem. But I
Mm-hmm.
do see students who actually type the entire sentence in the Google Translate or any other translator, then write it
Mm-hmm.
down. And then I always try to stop them and say, isn't this something you could have thought of on your own? Yes, but it takes a lot of time. Um, and I always try to encourage them to let go of the Dutch, right? You need to
Mm-hmm.
let go of the Dutch because Dutch and English, they have a different sentence structure, same as German and English, different sentence structure, German and Dutch as well.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if we don't give them the right exposure, we don't
Mm-hmm.
give them the useful and necessary scaffolds, then they're going to rely on Dutch.
Okay.
Um, and that's something you want to avoid. You want to give them enough exposure. I always, when I give them a review to read, I say, okay, highlight 5 words you want to use in your own review or sentences you want to use in your own review and reuse it. Use the sentence, copy the sentence from this review into your review, change the title of the book or change your opinion a bit and use it. And then do it
Mm-hmm.
again and again and again. So chunking is key to avoid, in order to avoid using the native language. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I definitely encourage them not to use a translator and to avoid using Dutch and try to think as an English speaker. And it is difficult because you have to be honest, if you don't have the language, you don't know the vocabulary, you're going to sound like someone who doesn't speak English. But that's fine.
Yeah.
That's where I come in to give you the right scaffold and exposure.
Understood. Understood. I really have to. I'm kind of at a crossroads where that is concerned.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I speak for apps, sometimes I speak against them, sometimes I speak for translators, sometimes against them. Because the thing is this, as I was teaching as well in a school setting is different, and
Yeah.
also preparing for exams is probably also a little bit different. I'm usually teaching people who are working, so there's a kind of efficiency that has to be adhered to. For example, in some cases they say never use anything other than the target language in class. But I mean, if I go into a firm that's paying me, I don't know, 50, 150 euros an hour, whatever, I can't spend 30 minutes dancing around until they guess the name coffee mug.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't do that. I have to use a quick translation and move on. So, you know, it's interesting how diverse this is, because I think as well, if you're working for an exam or something like that, then you might take a certain approach.
Yeah.
But if you're working in a firm, these are people that say they have a presentation to deliver every Thursday to an international team, and they just wanna do the standard, learn the standard presentation quickly. I have to find deficiencies, and
Yeah.
sometimes I have difficulty factoring out the translator.
Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah, because a lot of them, they're gonna use it anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, in some firms, like for example, Google Translate is forbidden for secrecy reasons.
Yeah.
Yes, security reasons. So I mean, there are also times when I also forbid it. But I suspect that more and more we're gonna have to find a way to as trainers, to make peace even with the translator. So that's why I was curious. I mean, they still can't do context so well
No.
yet,
No.
but they're well on the way.
And I
I
think
kid you not.
what you mentioned is key. I think it depends on what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
If you're teaching, as you are, very specific skills to a specific group of people who pay you to teach them that skill,
Mm-hmm.
then you're not going to be all difficult about using the native language or using a translator, because
Yeah.
if it aids you to get to that goal of that skill, that's fine. In my
Mm-hmm.
case, I have an entire year to teach these kids about English and in English and tralala, and I have 4 or 5 lessons a week. I can do
Mm-hmm.
a bit extra. I can do a bit difficult sometimes, and dance around and point the
Mm-hmm.
windows until they understand that window is a ram. I can do
Mm-hmm.
that, but you don't have the time. So I fully
Yeah.
understand your approach, and I definitely agree.
Yeah. 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 Well, I mean, as I said, I still take my hat off to you, and the real art is perhaps recognizing what kind of teacher or trainer you're required to be
Yeah,
at a particular time. You know, I mean, gone are the days when I would say, well, this is not what I am.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of like have to adapt who I am and what I provide depending on who I'm doing it for.
Yeah.
You know, the what do you call it? The action logic. Anyway, thank you for that. Very, very, very informative indeed. And we're actually coming down to the point where I want to ask you now, all the listeners know where they can find you. And as I said, you know, your links are going to be in the show notes as well. I'm very happy to do that. I'm proud. Thank you for joining this cross promotion.
Anytime.
Thank you. The last question that I wanted to ask you, Leontes, was, do you have any questions for me?
Well, I definitely have. I am wondering. So we're both probably English teachers, but what is your
Yes.
niche? What do you do?
Ah, well, my niche. I, well, let's see. Ah, you know, that's a very good question, and I should have an elevator pitch ready for you. But, um, my podcast attempts to get people to a stage where they're living the language, as in incorporating the language in their lives, finding meaning, creating meaning, and allowing it to unfold naturally within their lives. So I use natural conversations mostly, well, not really mostly, but a lot with non-native speakers of English on real topics.
Yeah.
I don't do grammar lessons there anymore, right? Or English lessons. That is for the podcast. For my training, I work mostly with people who already have some grasp of the language, and I try to get them to feel confident to a point where they can dance with the language. They feel
Oh, yeah.
confident enough to speak freely and appreciate their own version of natural speech, as long as they do it in a clear, understandable way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's that is basically what the business English learner or the work related learner of English would want. Yeah.
Yeah.
They want a confidence, and also to give them this the what they need to feel sovereign and not to feel as if they lose power when they have to use a language that is not their own.
Okay, great.
Yeah, that's basically what I do. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can talk about, I try to mix it up with art and so on, but sometimes more, sometimes less. But these are the basic goals,
Yeah. Nice.
what I have.
So you work
Yeah.
with business people mostly then, in companies.
Mostly people who use it for work purposes. Yes,
Okay.
they want to use the language in work settings, and I also do have a few people who are in high school level, around, I don't know, age, let's say 16, 17, 18, and sometimes I have people preparing for exams as well, or for job interviews.
Okay.
Yeah, that's basically what I do.
Great.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that was it. Thank
Great.
you very much, Leontes. It was very informative.
Thank
Very
you very much
nice.
for having me. It was an honor to be on your podcast.
Oh! It was an honor to have you. I was kind of surprised that you answered, just because
Of course.
I don't know. You seem, when I look, you seem as if you have so much to do, and you have your own thing going on. The YouTube thing is not easy.
No.
And I know it's not easy because I also do videos sometimes, and you have your permanent job also at the university now. Yeah. So I didn't expect that it would work out so quickly, but whatever the case is, I got the feeling that you gave of yourself. You shared a little heart for both of our listeners today.
I tried.
And yeah, thanks again, and hopefully the weather is fantastic over there in Holland.
Yeah, it is for the first time actually. Yeah, it's very nice.
Cool. Where are you, by the way?
I'm in Groningen, which again with the sound. But
Groningen.
do you know where Bunde is in Deutschland, in Germany?
Oh my God, no.
No, it's kind of.
Is it close to the German border?
Yeah, it's close to the German border. Yeah.
Really?
So Bunde is in Germany, and then About 15, 20 minutes drive, you get to my town, where I live in the north of the Netherlands.
I've been to Osnabrück, and I think Osnabrück is close to Amsterdam,
Also,
I think.
it's also close to the border, yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. But I don't know that place you mentioned.
And Oldenburg, do you know Oldenburg?
No.
No, no, not.
No, I'm gonna have to probably visit again
Yeah.
soon. Okay, Leontes, this episode has been wonderful, and I just want to take this little opportunity to quickly say thank you again
Thank you for having
for
me.
taking part. Yes, yes, and I am sure that my listeners will have derived some value from what you've said, and I can hope the same for your listeners as well.
I hope so. Yeah, it was an honor to be on your podcast.
Thank you. Looking forward to the next time.